My name is Marcus Thompson, and for 11 years I worked as the night supervisor at City General's morgue facility. The position required absolute precision in record keeping, as every body that entered our care had to be tracked from admission through final disposition. State regulations demanded detailed logs of all refrigerated storage units, with hourly checks documenting the status of each drawer throughout the night shift. Our cold storage system consisted of 24 stainless steel drawers, each equipped with individual temperature controls and identification placards that displayed the occupant's name, case number, and storage duration. The system was computerized, but protocol required manual verification logs as backup documentation. Drawer 17 had always been problematic in minor ways. The latch mechanism required extra pressure to engage properly, the temperature display occasionally flickered, and the identification placard had a tendency to work loose from its mounting. Nothing that affected functionality, but enough quirks that most staff avoided using it unless all other units were occupied. For 10 years, these mechanical issues were the extent of Drawer 17's problems. But in September 2019, I began noticing discrepancies in the storage, logs that I couldn't explain through equipment malfunction or clerical error. The computerized inventory system would show one body assigned to Drawer 17, standard single occupancy, consistent with the unit's design specifications. But the manual log sheets consistently recorded two names for the same drawer, written in different handwriting and apparently entered at different times during the shift. The first few times this occurred, I assumed other staff members were making documentation errors, perhaps confused about which drawer they were checking or accidentally duplicating entries from adjacent units. I implemented additional training sessions on proper logging procedures and increased my supervisory oversight of the documentation process. But the dual entries continued appearing. Not occasionally, every single night that Drawer 17 was occupied. The computerized system would show one body, the manual logs would show two, and no staff member would admit to making the additional entries. I began conducting the Drawer 17 checks personally, ensuring that my own observations would be properly documented without confusion or error. When I opened the drawer, I consistently found exactly one body, properly identified and positioned according to standard protocols. Yet when I reviewed the log sheets the following morning, I would find my single entry accompanied by a second name, written in handwriting that wasn't mine but appeared to be contemporaneous with my own documentation. November 3rd, 2:15 a.m., Thompson, Williams. Robert, 67M, natural causes, November 3rd, 2:15 a.m., Martinez. Elena, 54F, cardiac arrest. The second entry would appear in the same time slot as my original documentation, suggesting simultaneous logging by someone who wasn't present during my drawer check. But Elena Martinez wasn't in our system. No admission records, no case files, no evidence that anyone by that name had ever been processed through our facility. I installed a security camera focused specifically on Drawer 17, hoping to identify who was making the unauthorized log entries and determine how they were accessing the storage area without my knowledge. The camera footage showed only my own activities, opening the drawer, conducting visual verification of the single occupant, making the appropriate log entry, and securing the unit. No other personnel appeared in the recorded area during the times when the duplicate entries were supposedly being made, but the log sheets continued showing two names for every single occupancy drawer check. In December, I decided to spend an entire night positioned where I could maintain continuous visual surveillance of both Drawer 17 and the log sheets, eliminating any possibility of unauthorized documentation during periods when I wasn't directly observing. On December 15th, I brought a sleeping bag to the morgue and set up a monitoring station with clear sight lines to the drawer and the documentation desk. At 2 a.m., I opened Drawer 17 and found the body of James Patterson, a 72-year-old man who had died from complications following surgery. I completed the log entry while remaining in full view of both the drawer and the documentation. Patterson, James, 72M, surgical complications. Standard notation, properly formatted and clearly written. But as I watched, additional writing began appearing on the log sheet below my entry, not being written by any visible hand, but materializing gradually as if an invisible person were carefully forming letters with deliberate strokes. Rodriguez, Maria, 43F, motor vehicle accident. The writing appeared in real time, letter by letter, using blue ink identical to my pen, but forming words that I wasn't writing. I was holding my pen in my hand while watching different handwriting appear on the same document. I called out, "Who's there?" "Identify yourself!" But no one responded, and the writing continued until the entry was complete. I researched Maria Rodriguez through our computerized record system. No admission under that name, no case files, no evidence that anyone matching that description had been processed through our facility during the past year. But the next morning, the day shift reported receiving Maria Rodriguez, a 43-year-old woman who had been killed in a motor vehicle accident and was being transferred from the county coroner's office for temporary storage pending family arrangements. The second log entry had documented someone who didn't exist when it was written, but who would arrive at our facility 12 hours later. Throughout January, I documented this pattern. Drawer 17 would contain one body, but the logs would show two names, the actual occupant and someone who would arrive at our facility within the next 24 hours. The drawer was somehow anticipating future admissions, recording people who hadn't died yet or whose bodies hadn't yet been transferred to our care. On February 20th, I made a disturbing discovery. The second name appearing in the Drawer 17 logs was my own. Thompson. Marcus, 45M, workplace accident. I was alive, healthy, and standing in the morgue reading my own name and documentation that suggested I would become an occupant of the facility where I worked. I requested immediate transfer to day shift, citing family obligations, though the real reason was my reluctance to continue working in a morgue that was documenting my future death. But sometimes I call the night supervisor to ask about Drawer 17. The logs still show dual occupancy every night it's used, still predict future admissions with perfect accuracy, and still occasionally list the names of staff members who haven't yet become clients of the facility they serve. Some storage systems, I learned, operate according to principles that transcend normal inventory management, maintaining records that document not just current occupancy but future needs that haven't yet been recognized by the living. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and for 15 years I served as chief pathologist at Memorial Hospital's Forensic Division. The position required conducting detailed post-mortem examinations and dictating comprehensive findings into audio recordings that would later be transcribed into official autopsy reports. I used a digital voice recorder for all autopsy documentation, a reliable Sony device that I'd carried for over a decade. The recorder allowed me to capture detailed observations while keeping my hands free for examination procedures, and the audio files could be easily transferred to transcription services for report preparation. My dictation routine was methodical and professional. I would describe each step of the examination process, note anatomical observations, document evidence of disease or trauma, and conclude with cause of death determinations based on my findings. Standard forensic procedure that I'd performed thousands of times without incident. The recorder functioned flawlessly throughout my career. Clear audio quality, reliable file storage, and simple operation that allowed me to focus on examination procedures rather than technical concerns about documentation equipment. But on October 12, 2020, while reviewing audio files from a particularly complex case, I discovered something that challenged my understanding of both the recording process and the nature of post-mortem examination. The case involved Harold Morrison, a 68-year-old man who had died under circumstances requiring forensic investigation. The examination had proceeded normally. External inspection, internal organ examination, tissue sampling for laboratory analysis, and dictated documentation of all findings. When I played back my recorded observations, I heard my own voice conducting the standard autopsy dictation. But interspersed with my professional commentary were responses that I hadn't spoken. Additional voice recordings that seemed to be answering questions I had posed during the examination. Dr. Mitchell. External examination reveals a well-developed, well-nourished adult male. Unknown voice. 68 years old. As you noted in the preliminary documentation, Dr. Mitchell. No obvious signs of external trauma. Unknown voice. The trauma was internal, doctor. Myocardial infarction, anterior wall. The unknown voice was calm, professional, and clinically accurate. But I was certain that no one else had been present during Morrison's autopsy, and I had no memory of any conversation taking place during the examination. I checked the audio file's technical properties, looking for signs of editing, multiple recording sessions, or equipment malfunction that might explain the presence of additional voice content. The file showed no evidence of modification, single recording session, continuous timestamp, no breaks or edits that would indicate manipulation or contamination from external audio sources. But the unknown voice was clearly present, providing medically accurate information about Harold, Morrison's condition and cause of death. I consulted with our IT department about possible technical explanations for the mysterious audio content. Dr. Mitchell, this recording appears to be authentic, the technician reported after examining the file. No digital manipulation, no evidence of multiple sources being combined. Whatever you're hearing was recorded during the original session. I listened to the audio repeatedly, trying to identify the source of the unknown voice. The speaker sounded male, middle-aged, with professional medical vocabulary and clinical detachment appropriate for forensic discussion. Most disturbing was the accuracy of the unknown voice's observations. Every comment about Morrison's condition proved correct when compared to laboratory results and final autopsy findings. Unknown voice. Check the coronary arteries more carefully, doctor. You'll find 90% occlusion in the left anterior descending vessel. Laboratory analysis confirmed severe coronary artery disease exactly as the unknown voice had predicted. Unknown voice. The liver shows early signs of cirrhosis, though the patient had no documented history of alcohol abuse. Tissue examination revealed liver damage consistent with chronic alcohol consumption. Despite family statements that Morrison rarely drank, the unknown voice was providing accurate diagnostic information that I hadn't yet discovered. Through my own examination procedures, I decided to conduct a test using my recorder during the next scheduled autopsy. If the device was somehow capturing voices that weren't present during recording, I needed to understand the phenomenon and determine appropriate protocols for documentation. On October 19th, I conducted the autopsy of Margaret Chen, a 74-year-old woman who had died from apparent natural causes. I dictated my standard observations while paying careful attention to any sounds or voices that might be present during the examination. I heard nothing unusual during the procedure. No additional voices, no responses to my dictated observations, no indication that anyone other than myself was present in the autopsy suite. But when I reviewed the audio file, I found extensive dialogue between my recorded voice and the same unknown speaker who had appeared in Morrison's documentation, Dr. Mitchell. Cause of death appears to be cardiac. Arrest, unknown voice. Incorrect, doctor. Pulmonary embolism. Check the lungs more thoroughly. Dr. Mitchell, initial lung examination shows some congestion. Unknown voice. Bilateral pulmonary emboli, multiple clots. The heart stopped because the lungs couldn't function. The unknown voice's correction proved accurate. Detailed lung examination revealed multiple blood clots that had caused fatal pulmonary embolism. Not the cardiac arrest I had initially suspected. I began to realize that the mysterious voice was providing superior diagnostic insight, correcting my initial assessments and directing attention to findings that improved the accuracy of autopsy conclusions. Over the following weeks, I continued recording autopsy procedures while listening for any indication of additional voices during the actual examinations. I consistently heard nothing unusual during the procedures themselves, but the audio files always contained dialogue between my voice and the unknown speaker, who provided medical guidance that enhanced the quality of my forensic investigations. Unknown voice. The fracture pattern suggests blunt force trauma, not accidental fall. Unknown voice. Toxicology will show therapeutic levels of warfarin, but check for drug interactions. Unknown voice. Time of death was approximately 6 hours earlier than the police estimate. Every suggestion from the unknown voice proved accurate when verified through additional testing or investigation. I attempted to engage the mysterious speaker directly by asking questions during autopsy procedures, hoping to establish communication with whoever was providing the superior diagnostic insights. "Can you hear me?" I asked aloud during one examination. "Who are you?" No response during the procedure, but the audio playback captured my question followed by a clear answer. Unknown voice. I hear you perfectly, doctor. I'm a colleague who shares your commitment to accurate forensic determination. Dr. Mitchell, where are you located? Are you monitoring these procedures remotely? Unknown voice. I'm right here, doctor. I'm the gentleman on your examination table. I realized that the unknown voice belonged to Harold Morrison, the first deceased, individual whose autopsy had contained the mysterious additional commentary. Morrison was somehow providing post-mortem consultation on subsequent cases, offering medical expertise that improved forensic accuracy and enhanced the quality of death investigations. Dr. Mitchell, how is this possible? You're deceased. Morrison's voice. Death doesn't eliminate medical knowledge, doctor. It simply provides a different perspective on the diagnostic process. Over the following months, multiple deceased patients began providing audio commentary during autopsy procedures. Each offered specialized expertise based on their professional backgrounds or personal experience with the medical conditions that had caused their deaths. A deceased cardiologist provided insights about heart disease. A former nurse offered observations about medication interactions. A patient who had died from cancer shared detailed information about disease progression that enhanced my understanding of oncological pathology. The audio consultations improved my forensic work significantly. Difficult cases received expert guidance, complex medical conditions were explained with superior clarity, and family members received more accurate information about their loved ones' deaths. But I never again conducted autopsies alone. The recording equipment had become a medium for ongoing medical consultation with deceased colleagues who continued practicing forensic pathology from their perspective on the examination table. Some professional expertise I learned transcends the boundary between life and death, allowing dedicated physicians to continue providing medical insight that serves the living through collaboration that extends beyond normal employment parameters. My name is Robert Martinez, and for 18 years I worked as chief embalmer at Sacred Heart Memorial Services. The profession requires technical expertise in human preservation, understanding of physiological processes after death, and the ability to distinguish between normal post-mortem changes and genuinely unusual phenomena that occasionally occur in funeral home environments. Post-mortem movement is well documented in mortuary science. Bodies can exhibit various types of motion after death: muscle contractions due to residual nerve activity, position changes caused by rigor mortis development, and shifting that occurs as tissues settle and gas formation alters internal pressure. These movements are natural, predictable, and easily explained through basic knowledge of decomposition processes. During my career, I observed countless instances of normal post-mortem movement. Bodies that shifted position during rigor development, facial expressions that changed as muscle tension evolved, and limb repositioning that occurred as chemical processes affected tissue flexibility. Nothing alarming or supernatural, simply the predictable physical changes that accompany the transition from life to death. But on November 3, 2020, I encountered a case that challenged my understanding of post-mortem physiology and forced me to reconsider the boundaries between normal death processes and genuinely impossible phenomena. The deceased was Father Michael O'Brien, an 87-year-old Catholic priest who had died peacefully in his sleep at the parish rectory. His body was delivered to our facility for preparation and viewing, with funeral services scheduled for the following week. Father O'Brien's initial examination revealed a textbook example of natural death: peaceful facial expression, normal body positioning, and physiological indicators consistent with cardiac arrest during sleep. Standard embalming procedures would be sufficient to prepare him for viewing and provide his parishioners with appropriate final memories. I began embalming at approximately 8:30 p.m., following my established routine for elderly individuals who had died from natural causes. The process proceeded normally through arterial injection, cavity treatment, and initial cosmetic preparation. Father O'Brien's body responded appropriately to chemical preservation. Good circulation of embalming fluid, proper tissue fixation, and gradual development of the preservation effects that would maintain his appearance throughout the viewing period. At 10:15 p.m., I stepped away from the preparation table to retrieve additional cosmetic supplies from the storage room. The preparation area remained well lit, and Father O'Brien's body was positioned exactly as I had placed it. supine on the embalming table, arms at sides, head slightly elevated on the standard positioning block. When I returned to the preparation table 3 minutes later, Father O'Brien was sitting upright, not partially elevated or shifted to one side, completely upright, back straight, head erect, in a position that would require significant muscular effort to achieve and maintain. His eyes were open, focused on something I couldn't see, and his lips were moving in what appeared to be silent speech. I stood motionless, trying to process what I was observing. Father O'Brien had been deceased for over 6 hours, had undergone complete embalming procedures that would prevent any possibility of resumed biological function, and was displaying physical activity that violated every principle of post-mortem physiology. But he was definitely sitting up, definitely conscious in some capacity, and definitely engaged in what appeared to be prayer. I approached the table carefully. "Father O'Brien?" He turned toward me with clear recognition and awareness. His lips continued moving in silent prayer, but he nodded slightly in acknowledgement of my presence. "Father, you were..." He raised one hand in a gentle gesture that suggested patience and understanding. His prayer continued, lips forming words I couldn't hear but could recognize as Latin phrases typical of Catholic liturgy. I checked his pulse points, searching for any sign of resumed cardiovascular function. No heartbeat, no circulation, no warm blood flow that would indicate return to life. But Father O'Brien maintained perfect upright posture with muscular control that should have been impossible in a deceased individual. I had been trained to handle unusual post-mortem phenomena, but nothing in my education had prepared me for a situation where the deceased maintained consciousness and voluntary movement while showing all other signs of completed death. Father O'Brien's prayer continued for approximately 20 minutes. I remained nearby, observing carefully and trying to understand what was occurring. His movements were deliberate and purposeful, making the sign of the cross, clasping hands in prayer position, and maintaining the reverent posture appropriate for religious devotion. At 10:40 p.m., Father O'Brien looked directly at me and spoke clearly. "Thank you for your patience, Robert. I needed time to complete my final prayers before accepting the permanence of this transition." His voice was normal conversational tone, warm and professional, exactly as I would expect from an elderly priest addressing a parishioner. "Father, I don't understand what's happening. You died yesterday." "I did die," he replied calmly, "but I hadn't finished my evening prayers." Some responsibilities transcend the boundary between life and death, particularly for those of us who have made lifelong commitments to spiritual service. We talked quietly for another 10 minutes. Father O'Brien explained that he had been aware during the embalming process, had appreciated my respectful treatment of his remains, and had needed time to complete the religious obligations that had been interrupted by his unexpected death. "I'm ready now," he said finally. "Please continue with your preparation work. I won't disturb you again." Father O'Brien lay back down on the embalming table, positioned himself appropriately for continued preparation, and closed his eyes. He appeared to return to the normal state of death, showing no further signs of consciousness or voluntary movement. I completed his preparation procedures, including standard jaw closure techniques that would maintain appropriate facial positioning during viewing. The work proceeded normally, with no further unusual activity or post-mortem movement. But throughout the preparation process, I could hear faint whispering, Latin phrases spoken so quietly that I couldn't make out specific words, but rhythmic enough to suggest continued prayer. The whispering came from Father O'Brien's direction. Though his jaw was securely closed and his body showed no signs of respiratory activity or vocal cord function, Father O'Brien's funeral services proceeded with appropriate dignity. His parishioners expressed satisfaction with his peaceful appearance and the respectful preparation he had received. The viewing was well attended, and the funeral mass was conducted with full Catholic ceremony. But throughout the services, I continued hearing faint whispered prayers coming from the casket. Other attendees seemed unaware of the sounds, but I could clearly distinguish Latin liturgical phrases being spoken continuously during the viewing and funeral mass. After burial, I researched Father O'Brien's background and discovered that he had been known for his dedication to prayer, often spending hours in silent devotion and maintaining prayer schedules that continued even during illness or fatigue. His final prayers, begun on the evening of his death, were apparently continuing beyond the boundaries of life and death, completed by spiritual dedication that transcended normal physiological limitations. I never encountered another case quite like Father O'Brien's, but I began paying closer attention to the religious backgrounds of individuals I prepared for burial. Many showed subtle signs of continued spiritual activity, peaceful expressions that seemed to reflect ongoing prayer, positioning that suggested reverent posture, and occasional whispered sounds that might represent continued devotional practices. Some spiritual commitments, I learned, are strong enough to continue beyond death, allowing dedicated individuals to complete their religious obligations through forms of consciousness that operate independently of normal biological function. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and for 13 years I worked night shifts at County General's Morgue facility. Night attendant duties included receiving bodies from hospitals, coroner's offices, and emergency services, then conducting initial processing that prepared remains for autopsy or funeral home transfer. Every body that entered our facility required proper identification through standardized toe tags that displayed name, case number, date of admission, and preliminary cause of death. These tags were essential for maintaining chain of custody, preventing identification errors, and ensuring appropriate processing according to family wishes and legal requirements. Toe tags were typically attached at the point of death. Hospitals applied them before transfer. Coroners used them during initial examination, and emergency services placed them when bodies were recovered from accident scenes. The tags accompanied remains throughout the entire post-mortem process, serving as permanent identification that prevented mix-ups or administrative errors. For 12 years, this system worked flawlessly. Every body arrived with appropriate identification, tags matched intake documentation, and our processing procedures maintained accurate records from admission through final disposition. But on March 15, 2021, I received a body that challenged this fundamental aspect of morgue operations. The delivery came from Metro Emergency Services at approximately 11:30 p.m. Standard transport van, proper documentation from the responding paramedics, and a body bag containing what appeared to be a middle-aged male who had died from unknown causes pending investigation. I conducted routine intake procedures, photographing the sealed body bag, reviewing transport documentation, and preparing workspace for initial examination and toe tag verification. When I opened the body bag, I found a well-preserved adult male approximately 45 years old, showing no obvious signs of trauma or disease. But he had no toe tag attached to either foot. I checked the transport documentation again. The paramedics had noted unidentified male, no ID present. Toe tag attached per protocol, but no tag was present on the body. I contacted Metro Emergency Services, inquiring about the missing identification tag and requesting clarification about the circumstances of recovery. Ms. Walsh, our crew definitely attached a toe tag before transport, the dispatcher confirmed. Standard procedure that we follow for all bodies. The tag should be there. I examined both feet carefully, looking for any indication that a tag had been attached and subsequently removed. No residue from adhesive, no marks from tag placement. No evidence that identification had ever been present. I checked the body bag thoroughly, searching for a tag that might have become detached during transport. No loose tags, no identification materials, no documentation that would provide name or case information. The body was completely anonymous. No personal effects, no distinctive marks or tattoos, no dental work that might assist with identification. A person who had died without leaving any trace of identity. I photographed the body for identification purposes and assigned a temporary case number pending investigation by the coroner's office. Standard procedure for unidentified remains that required additional research before processing could continue. The body was stored in drawer 12, with documentation indicating unknown male, 2021-0847, and a note about missing identification tag. At 6:00 a.m., when day shift arrived, I completed my standard end-of-shift report detailing the overnight admissions and any unusual circumstances requiring follow-up attention, but when I conducted final verification of drawer 12 before leaving, I found something that made my hands shake. A toe tag attached to the unknown male's right foot. The tag was handwritten in blue ink. using block letters that looked familiar but that I couldn't immediately identify. It read, Walsh, Jennifer, 42F, pending investigation. My name, my age, and a status indicating that my death was under investigation. I stared at the tag for several minutes, trying to understand how it had appeared overnight and why it bore my personal information rather than details about the unidentified male. I checked the handwriting more carefully. The letter formation, pen pressure, and stylistic elements were identical to my own writing style, but I had no memory of creating the tag or attaching it to the body. I removed the tag and examined it closely. Standard morgue identification tag, proper format, and information written in what appeared to be my own handwriting. But the content suggested that I was the deceased individual, rather than the night attendant processing the remains. I contacted Supervisor Martinez, reporting the mysterious appearance of the toe tag and requesting guidance about appropriate documentation procedures. Jennifer, you probably attached the tag yourself during processing and don't remember due to fatigue, Martinez suggested. Night shift work can cause memory gaps, especially during routine procedures. But I was certain I hadn't created the tag. The handwriting might look like mine, but I had no memory of writing identification information or attaching tags to the unidentified body. More disturbing was the content, my name associated with a death investigation, as if I were the subject of post-mortem examination rather than the staff member conducting intake. Procedures. I kept the tag as evidence of the unusual incident and completed my shift report noting the mysterious appearance of identification materials overnight. But over the following weeks, I began experiencing health problems that seemed consistent with the pending investigation status noted on the mysterious toe tag. Fatigue, weakness, occasional chest pains that might indicate cardiac issues requiring medical attention. I scheduled appointments with my physician, underwent comprehensive health evaluations, and received test results indicating early signs of cardiovascular disease that could potentially lead to sudden cardiac death if left untreated. The toe tag had somehow predicted health problems that I wasn't aware of when it appeared, suggesting that my own mortality was being documented before I understood the risks I was facing. On April 20th, exactly 1 month after finding the mysterious toe tag, I was admitted to County General Hospital for emergency cardiac procedures, the same facility where I had worked night shifts, now treating me as a patient rather than an employee. During my hospitalization, I learned that the unidentified male from March 15th had never been claimed or identified. He remained in cold storage, still listed as unknown male, in 2021, 0847, awaiting family notification or burial arrangements through the county, but his case file now contained extensive documentation about my medical condition, treatment procedures, and recovery progress, as if my health crisis were somehow connected to his unidentified death. I recovered fully from the cardiac episode and returned to work after 6 weeks of medical leave. But I requested transfer to day shift, citing health concerns that made night work inadvisable. The unidentified male was eventually buried in the county cemetery after the standard waiting period for unclaimed remains. But I kept the toe tag that had borne my name, wondering whether it had been a prediction, a warning, or simply a coincidence that helped me recognize health problems before they became fatal. Some identification systems, I learned, operate according to principles that transcend normal administrative procedures, documenting not just current identity but future risks that haven't yet been recognized by the individuals they're designed to protect.